Adil, Najam, you are going to the speaker's corner, okay? You are the Vice Chancellor of the Lahore University of Management Sciences, and you are also a member of the board of IIASA, so you know IIASA very well. You're going to talk about governance in institutions and global change, and the focus of your research is around environmental policies and environmental challenges in our economies and society. So please, Adil, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I've moved here partly because I don't know if I can change the narrative, but at least I wanted to change the pictures. And my pictures look better than me anyhow. I wanted to raise 3 questions, and I promise not to answer any one of them, because then we'll have nothing else to talk about. But I think they are questions worth thinking about, not easy to answer, but important to think about. The first of the questions I want to raise is, can planetary global challenges be managed by an international system of governance? This is a question that's been with us for a long time. The system we have is an international system. It's done actually very, very well. It's done very, very well. But I would argue that one of the limits we are reaching is the limits of an international system where it is no longer clear that all the nations of the world, working individually in their specific individual national interest, will arrive at the global interest. And I think what Professor Schelling said this morning about the impacts of climate change partly proved that point, that the interest of the government of Pakistan may not be the interest of the poor in Pakistan, and that is probably true for many others. And certainly the interest of 170 countries put together may not be the interest of those. Let me leave that there. The second question I wish to raise is about the nature of globalness in our globally connected planet. We use the word global very loosely. Global climate change, globalization, global crisis, Hakuna Matata, everyone together. But we need to think about the meaning of the word global if we are going to be honest to that world, and I want to say a few words about that. And the third is, can the governance of tomorrow emerge from the institutions of today? And embedded in the question is the possible answer, but let me rotate the question slightly because it makes more sense, because I want to use whatever time I have to tell a few very quick stories. I'm going to be silly, and I know professors can be silly. I don't know if IIASA council members can, but Pavel, with your permission, allow me to be silly. Imagine for a moment you are not in Vienna. Imagine for a moment you are not in Austria. Imagine for a moment you are not in Europe. Imagine for a moment you are not even on this planet Earth. Imagine you are on some other planet. Choose your planet. There used to be 9, then there were 8, and IIASA tells us one of them is not doing particularly well either. Wherever you are, from that planet now look down on the planet Earth. Look down on planet Earth as if it was a country. I'm not talking about, world government. But imagine you were looking down on Earth as if it was a country. What sort of a country would you see? That's the question. I can throw many numbers at you, I won't. But let me suggest to you the country you will see is an extremely poor country. 1 billion people on less than $1 a day. 2 billion people on less than $2.50 a day. It used to be $2 a day, but the dollar ain't what it used to be, so it's now $2.50 a day. So as a whole, you see a poor country. But it's not just a poor country, it's a divided country. The familiar champagne glass. It looks not like the Austrian beer mug, which would be good. It looks like the champagne glass, 80% of the resources and 20% of the people. I'm not talking rich country, poor country. I'm talking rich person, poor person. I used to last 20 years live in Boston. I worked in the rich part of Boston. 2 miles from me was the third world part of Boston. I now live in Lahore. I live in the first world part of Lahore. 2 miles from me is the third world part of Lahore. That's what I'm talking about. You would posit that the world as a country is not just a poor country, a divided country, it's a degraded country. Its air is not worth breathing, its forests are denuded, its land is degraded, its oceans are rising, its climate is changing. So in all those terms that we are familiar with, we live in a degraded country. We live not just in a degraded country, we live in an insecure country. Insecure, again, not just because of the needless wars we keep fighting, But insecure in water insecurity, in food security, in climate insecurity, insecure in every measure of insecurity that we've ever been able to come up with, if you look at the planet as a whole. You would come to the conclusion that the planet as a whole is a very poorly governed country. By all the measures with which we govern the planet, govern the United Nations, if you applied that to any country, even my country, Pakistan, might start looking like a well-governed country. Not really, but nearly there. Nearly there. You will come to the conclusion that the world as a country is an unsafe country. As a Pakistani passport holder who lived in the US for 20 years, I know all about travel advisories. If you had a travel advisory to the planet Earth, it would be to catch the first rocket ship out of air. Now, why am I doing this to a wonderful audience in a wonderful place like this? Not because my narrative is of desperation, but I think the reality is that we live on a third world planet. And we've been trying to govern it as if it was Austria. I wish it was. As if it was Sweden. I wish it was. And if we are going to look at the institutions of governance for this planet, then we will have to look at a different type of mechanisms for the third world planet. I probably don't have time, but if I have just 1 minute, can I throw one more image at you? And I'm going to leave the other images off, as I very often have to do, but I wanted to put this one because I thought of it this morning when the first panel was happening. One of the things we need is real innovation is needed in who is involved in governance discussions and how. And here is the story of my life. It's not exactly the 40 years of IIASA, but it's pretty close. This is very broad, this is very general, so it's going to be generalistic, but bear with me. Back in the 1980s when I started in this, a lot of things were happening. We have done very good in governance. But if you look at the primary actors of governance, and I added science only this morning, government, civil society, business, and science. In general, how did the world look at them and what did the world expect of them? Government, now back in the 1980s, was the solution. We got all these treaties, all these agreements, new ministries happening all over the world. Government was supposed to be the solution. Civil society was the monitor. Keep them honest. Business was the problem. Science, of course, was the advisor. Advisors are great people. You can believe whatever part you want, already believe in, of what they are saying. You come to the 1990s, you look at the same schema, something has changed, Rio has happened, civil society is now the silver bullet. Civil society is going to solve the problems of the world. The government is catalyst. They're going to help civil society do that. Business is still the problem. Science, still the advisor. You come to the 2000s. I look at my students, I look at my classes, the world has changed again in very dramatic ways. Business is now the solution. Bill Gates is going to save the world. Government is now the problem. Civil society is now the catalyst, but it's going to help business do the saving of the planet. Science? Still advice being understood by all three in whatever parts meets their message anyhow in the first place. Where do we go in the future? And this is what I want to end with. It sounds cute, but I hope it is not. A real partnership is needed between the four. And what that means is each has to do what they are best at. Each has to do what they are best at. And what science is best at may actually be being distant from policy enough to actually make a difference on policy. I won't go through it right now, maybe in the question and answers, but that might also be the lesson of the IPCC. Thank you very much.
Thank you.